Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Chaiyya Chats. My name is Ruben Thomas, and I'm very happy to have with us again Reverend Father Matt Alexander. Matt Utchin, thanks for coming on with us.
It's good to be with you.
Yes, it's great to have you here, Utchin, and I'm very excited about the topic that we're going to be covering for the next few weeks. As mentioned in our most recent podcast, we wanted to go over dating and relationships and go into different aspects of it that we feel that a lot of young couples face today. So today's topic is specifically addressing attraction and lust. So, Achin, in your ministry, in your experience, what are some struggles that you've seen in attraction and lust, and how do you go about addressing them to young couples?
I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of people are trying to figure out, especially in our culture and the way things are, and especially in high school and then in college and then beyond that as well, how to have a healthy relationship. And I think that it's a good one to cover. And the usually that we talk about it, at least our Bible studies here, is I like to go through the story of Samson. Samson is a story that we don't really cover in the Sunday school curriculum anymore, but generally, we most people gloss over the story and think of Samson as this like big, strong type of figure, like a Hercules type figure who just goes around and is blessed by God and able to do all these things and defeat the Philistines. But what you see in Samson is a really flawed figure too, as well. And you see this a lot of darkness and difficulty, and you can see his strengths, but also his weaknesses. And I think it's a good one to really analyze when we're kind of thinking about relationships. And today, just introducing into it, I think it's good to cover lust first.
I think that's a great story that really embodies the topic that we're trying to cover today. So, within Samson, where do you usually start?
Samson, there's a lot to the story, and I don't want to read the entire thing to you over the podcast, but if anybody wants to read it, it's Judges chapter 13, 14, 15. Really, let's just kind of go through. Let me read some excerpts from this, so we can just zoom in on some of this. So I'm reading from Judges chapter 13, verses 1 through 5, and then I'm going to skip ahead to chapter 14, verse 1 to 3. Again, the sons of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord delivered them into the hands of the Philistines for 40 years. Now there was a certain man from Zorah, from the tribe of the family of the Danites, whose name was Manoah, and his wife was barren and could not give birth. And the angel of the Lord appeared to the woman and said to her, Indeed, now you are barren and have not given birth, but you shall conceive a son. Now therefore be careful not to drink wine or strong drink, and do not eat anything unclean. For behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son, and no razor shall come upon his head, for the child shall be a Nazarite to God from the womb. And he shall begin to deliver Israel out of the hand of the Philistines. Chapter 14. Now Samson went down to Timnah and saw a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the foreigners. So he went up and told his father and mother, saying, I have seen a woman in Timnah of the daughters of the Philistines. Now therefore get her for me as a wife. Then his father and mother said to him, Are there not daughters of your brethren, or a woman among all my people? Must you go and get a wife from the uncircumcised foreigners? And Samson said to his father, Get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. But his father and mother did not know it was from the Lord, that he was seeking vengeance against the Philistines. To you belongs the praise of God, Barak more. I skipped ahead. We went to the birth of Samson and then a little bit into after he grew up, and then it's an interesting story.
Right. And it's interesting. It starts off, right, it's emphasized that Samson should follow the Nazarite vow. That's specified to his parents, isn't it?
Yeah, so the Nazarite vow, no razor come on his head. He can't cut his hair. And he shall, no strong drink. Mm-hmm. So even his mom can't even drink it while she's pregnant.
And so going from the Nazarite vow, it sounds very strict. Not a lot of room to go out and experience what other people might be. But we're talking about attraction and lust. So I think what we're seeing in chapter 14 doesn't really follow that same type of severity, does it?
Yeah, you see Samson, great strength.
Mm.
You see coming up later in the chapter, in chapter 14, you see him tear a lion apart with his bare hands.
Mhm.
You see him in later chapters, with his strength defeating huge amounts of people in battle. But you also see now, though you see great physical strength, you see his great weakness. And his weakness is really lust, because you have it when he comes to his parents. He says, tells his father and mother, I have seen a woman in Timnah, the daughter of the Philistines. Now, therefore, get her for me as a wife. Or later on, when he says, get her for me, for she is right in my eyes. Um, he sees this woman, and immediately he wants her for a wife, like his possession. I
Right.
want her to be mine. And fundamentally, that's lust. Trying to take something that's not yours, to use somebody for your own pleasure, in that sense of, and that's really what the fall of Samson is.
Right. And you see, like lusting with his eyes, that's very specific in there too.
Yeah,
Right. And even in spite of what his parents say, I think they also tell him, or they ask him, is there not anyone amongst our own people?
yeah. They try to plead with them. They try to talk him out of it. But this is he's set on it, and he's forcing it, and he's saying no. This is what I want, and they listen. They kind of and they go with it, and this leads to a lot of destruction. This first one, this is not Delilah. This is just the first of Samson's unhealthy relationships. He ends up marrying her. They have a 7-day wedding party. In the midst of that, he tells the people this riddle. She begs and pleads for an answer, because the Philistines come to her and say, if you don't tell us the answer to the riddle, we're going to kill you and your father. And so then she goes to Samson and begs and pleads for 7 days during this entire wedding feast, and saying, you don't love me if you don't tell me. So Samson gets so annoyed with her, the word annoyed is there, that he finally tells her, and she immediately tells them, and they know the answer to the riddle. And then Samson knows that she betrayed him, and he gets upset and goes and such. And then afterwards, her father, thinking that Samson's abandoned her, gives her as a wife to one of Samson's friends. Says one of his companions, and in some translations says it's his best man. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and and then Samson becomes enraged, and it just causes a big thing. And then um, he he does this kind of prank on them, and by putting a fire on the tails of these foxes, and then lets them loose, and they go and burn the runaway foxes go all through, and they burn basically the whole place down. All the grain and all that catches on fire, and then the Philistines get upset and angry, and they go and kill this his wife and father-in-law. And then Samson gets even more enraged and goes and takes the jawbone of a donkey, and strikes all of them down for what they've done.
Right.
It's just a cycle of destruction. He loses friendships, and then it just turns into this huge conflict that destroys so many people.
And like you said, this is just the first story,
Yeah,
right? We haven't even got into Delilah yet. This led to a lot of violence, a lot of killing, right? A lot of broken relationships, right? And
yeah,
then this leads to certain patterns that Samson exhibits when he meets Delilah too. But it all starts at the beginning of chapter 14 here.
yeah. It all starts there. It all starts there. This is where the weakness in when he makes these decisions and he follows the lust of his heart, he has no idea the destruction it's going to cause. And that's the same with many people in relationships. They get into things led by their lust, but not realizing the destruction it's going to cause. And I'm not saying they're going to start wars, but essentially that there is a certain sense of it leads to a lot of personal destruction that pertains to both people, but then also those around them. You see friendships lost. You see relationships and families destroyed as well.
Right.
But at the outset, it starts with this little tiny thing of these lustful thoughts of, I want this person for myself. and that this person, it's the sense is like, why do you want this person? Because I want this person. They make me happy,
Mhm.
and or whatever it is. And I get it. For a lot of young people, it's like they want companionship. They feel it's nice to have somebody interested in you. It's nice when somebody cares. It's nice when somebody shows interest in you. But the problem with that is the seeds of this can lead to an unhealthy relationship, and rarely leads to a healthy marriage.
And like you said, the reason that people pursue these relationships, for the most part, it is from attraction, right? The only reason that you're going to go and talk to somebody to see if they're interested in you is probably because you find them attractive, right? I mean, that's the first
Yeah.
thing. Like, it's the first thing that we see in a person. Like, we see with our eyes, and even Samson says it here. It's right in my eyes, and we probably say the same thing to ourselves. Is that that person is really cute. That person is really attractive.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. And that's there. It's just about the depth of where this goes. Are you just want this person because um, they look this way to you, and I want them. But the issue is because I want them to be mine. I want to use them um, in that sense. Or is it something more? And beauty has to go beyond skin deep. It has to go to the beauty of the soul and the beauty of the spirit, of caring for somebody, and who they are, and getting to know them, and understanding who they are, beyond the look. Because I mean, our looks are fleeting, right? And the way and that's, it's okay, and that's a wonderful thing, and it's understandable to be attracted, but you can't be controlled by your desires. You can't be led around by the lust of your flesh. That it that's what's making you make decisions. You can't do that.
Right. And I think an important thing with lust is that it's not just confined to one person, right? I mean, if you have lust in your heart, it may manifest itself towards other people too, in other avenues, right? Just because you're in a relationship doesn't take lust away,
Yes,
right?
you're right. You're right. A lust can exist in a relationship as well. It doesn't go away, and that's where people make mistakes in a relationship, and lead and fall into a lot of um, sinful behavior, whether it be sexual sin or whether it be um, jealousy, and all the other unhealthiness of relationships. I think we can try and cover that later on when we talked about Delilah. But really, you see with lust at the beginning, that it leads to such unhealthiness, that it's so destructive, and that it sets inside of Samson's heart, and it lasts all the way through, even after he's married, the first time and even the second time. That it blinds him to what everybody else can very clearly see. His parents could see it, but he refused to see their advice. He refused to listen to what they had to say because he was blinded by his own desire and his own lust. Had he been level-headed, he would have taken into account what his parents were saying. And I
Right.
know that's hard for a lot of young people to hear, that they have to listen to what other people say because they may not want the person that their parents would pick out for them, and and that's true, and I understand that. But we have to seek wise counsel. We have to listen to people who can give us advice that might be good, for us, and we have to take that into account. We have to take into account what parents say, and a lot of times, it may not be comfortable. You may not be liking hearing that, but if you earned respect and if you earned um, their uh, their ability to see you um, make good decisions in other aspects of your life, then this really big aspect, they're more likely to be able to trust you with things, to know that you're making a good, and level-headed decision about things. But you have to take into account what other people are saying, whether it be parents or mentors or spiritual mentors or spiritual fathers, and people that who genuinely pray for you, and care about you. You should be able to sit down and listen to them. Here, Samson didn't listen to anybody. He didn't listen to his friends. He didn't listen to his parents, and it just led to a lot of destruction.
And like you said, I mean, when you're even initially trying to establish this relationship, the other person is really the only thing you think about. It's probably the biggest care you have in the world. You're waiting for that person to text you back or to call you back, and you get that, like, nervous feeling whenever you see their name pop up, and you're just always thinking about that person, right? And like you said, that could lead to, these sinful behaviors, these sinful thoughts born out of lust, right? Everything else seems to just fall away at that moment. Some questions that I've heard too is that, how do you draw the line here, right? Because you said the last thing you want to do is to fall into sinful behavior, right? But then the question is, where is that line with someone? And if you did cross that line or even do certain things, what is the harm in that, right? Whether that's on a physical level or an emotional or mental level, what is the harm in that?
Yeah, ultimately, to start with the second part, all lustful behavior, all sin leads to destruction. All sin fundamentally is going to lead to destruction. It's not, they're empty promises or things that we in our soul, we crave life. And sin is a cheap substitute for it, that we try to substitute for it. And it never satisfies, and it leads to destruction. You see this in relationships. A lot of times, when in young relationships, you can see, especially where you have, many of you were younger and things like that, you thought, oh, if I dress a certain way, then this person will notice me. If I act a certain way, if I talk a certain way, then this person will pay attention to me. They'll be interested in me. And ultimately, you shouldn't have to change who you are to get somebody to notice you. And ultimately, that's manipulative in its very nature. And a manipulative relationship is never gonna pan out. Two, it moves into relationships where it's like, oh, if I act a certain way, if I do certain things for this person, then they'll love me. Then they'll want to be with me. Then they'll stay with me. But that's not the case. It just doesn't bear out to be that way. It tends to be the opposite. It doesn't lead to commitment. It leads to, more often than not, jealousy, envy, and a lot of difficult struggles inside the relationship, outside the relationship. It leads to isolation. And this is where it all starts to blow up and things start to fall apart. So you can have sometimes a good, healthy relationship, sometimes completely destroyed by behavior that is sinful, that leads to this. And nobody ever sets out thinking that it's going to do that. But here, Samson didn't either. He thought everything was going to be fine, but it didn't. It led to so much destruction.
Mm-hmm.
This is why it does matter. It does matter what relationships are based on and where things are. It's okay in a certain sense. It's wonderful to be that, you get the idea that as a young person, that almost that puppy love kind of like, it's wonderful to be interested in somebody, have somebody be interested in you. And it's a good and wonderful feeling. And the reason why is because those are seeds of what it is to be in a healthy, good marriage, to have somebody in that sense, a companion as God intends it to be.
Right.
And so because there is healthiness in marriage and healthiness and holiness in it, in a marriage that is, again, a healthy relationship and what God has designed it for. The issue is we want a taste of it, but the thing is, you can't have that until the time is right and you're ready for that. Until you walk into the church one day and then you walk out as one.
Mm-hmm.
But and there's a reason why, because it's a cheap substitute. It's pretending something is something that it's not.
And then in that case, like going back to the initial question then of, especially for a young couple, how do you know where to draw this line of what is good and right and what's too far or what's too much?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard because a lot of times we draw these lines in the sand and we try to get as close to the line as possible without, thinking crossing it. And what ends up happening is the person, or whatever it be, and this goes with all sins. But we get as close to the line as possible, and then we fall over, and then we draw a new line, and then we get as close to the line as possible and draw a new line, and then it just gets, you get the idea. Everything just falls apart, in that sense. Really, what we need to be doing is, there's no need to be even close to the line. Why are we drawing lines? Why are we doing this? Why are we looking for like this legalism? The spirit of it is that, we should be avoiding temptation. We should avoid places where you're going to be tempted. Avoid situations where you're going to be tempted. That when you are strong, you make decisions. Spiritually, when you're thinking clearly, when everything is, you decide your values, you decide all of these things, and what right and wrong is. If you wait to the time of temptation to decide what your values are, you're going to fall right away. That goes with all sin. But if in the calm, in the healthiness of life, and in prayer, what is good for you, what you're doing. You just you set those the certain boundaries. How things are. Part of it is, part of our culture nowadays is we tend to, if anything, I would say take the romance out of everything. You may think that I'm saying that the things that I'm saying take the romance out, but I would say it's the opposite. If you're going to go on a date with somebody, go on a date. Go out with them, have some dinner, right? See a movie, or do something, right? You get the idea, and then drop the person off and go back. You get the idea, and then or take two separate cars to go there, and then go home. What is this? What ends up happening, especially in college relationships, is a lot of people they don't do that. They don't put any effort into it. They just sit back. They sit back and turn on Netflix, and hang out in somebody's place, and then missed it. And again, you're putting yourself in a situation where you're going to be tempted. And that's, are you going to tell your grandkids, oh, you know what, we fell in love by watching this on Netflix? No. But go out, have some coffee, talk, get to know each other, go for a walk, go to public places, do things. You're young, enjoy, do fun things, spend time with friends together. You should be able to have friendships and be a part of all of this as well, instead of just getting so enamored in each other that you lose and forsake everything else, and such, or you spend all night talking to each other every night and then end up failing all your exams. What are we doing? You have to be able to live healthy, in a certain sense. You have to be able to get out and be a human being. You can't miss out on everything that it means to be growing up and young and learning and making friendships and stuff, because you get so enamored in one person. Because then that relationship will head to an unhealthy place, and then it'll blow up and it'll destroy, and then you find yourself alone, because you forsake everybody else.
Right. And about avoiding temptation, right? Putting yourself in the right situation. I think in the current situation that we're in, right, everyone's staying home and quarantined. In a way, people have to keep their distance from each other. Young couples have to have that distance, and it's tough. It's hard, right? Especially when you're in that initial young, you said, puppy love stage. That's hard.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of couples are forced to take a break in a certain sense in this way and communicate in other ways, and I'm sure this is really hard in that sense.
Right, and you wouldn't want that to lead to any lustful behavior on your own either. Because there's always a chance for that too.
Yeah.
Right.
No matter, again, in general, lustful hearts tend to figure out a way to satisfy that in the best they can. But we're called to be led by the Spirit, to calm that, to be, to care about somebody, to be, you can care about somebody, you can love somebody, you have to love somebody without lusting after them, without using them for your own pleasure, or thinking that you're doing something that you'll cause them to care about you, and that manipulative behavior, that is there. It's a selfish love. It's ultimately a selfish love, and a selfish love is not what marriage is. You have to learn what selflessness is. That God loves us selflessly, and then learn to be able to care about somebody and love somebody else in a selfless manner.
I think that's a good place for us to wrap up this topic. As we said, like lust and attraction are very huge parts of a relationship that should be addressed. And as we've seen in the story of Samson, his lust only leads him down a worse path. And we'll see that in the coming chapters where the story of Samson goes. But for this video, thank you, Achin, for taking time to talk with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
I hope everyone continues to stay safe, and please stay tuned for another episode of Chaiyya Chats.